Good day, everyone. Welcome to Decoding the Future podcast. Today, we're going to explore how data and AI is reshaping the retail space. I'm Mahesh Krishnan. I'm the Regional Chief Technology Officer at EP.2, based out of Melbourne, in Australia. And joining me today is Andrew from our data and AI team. Andrew, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thanks, Mahesh. Yes, I'm Andrew Gorkich, one of the lead consultants in data science within Fujitsu Data and AI in the APAC region. Background in working with deep learning, machine learning, and all things artificial intelligence. So I managed to figure out how to talk to these AI models. So it's good fun.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to talk about your experience in the retail space as well?
Sure, yeah. So I've worked with a couple of different retailers in the past. There was a lot around logistics and distribution. So trying to understand the best way to move stock around different distribution centers across Australia. There's another project I worked in the retail space, focusing on labor and how you can optimize the workforce required to be able to distribute. So a lot around logistics. Had a few conversations with retailers around Gen AI and how they can leverage large language models in their online stores. And just recently working with an energy retailer, trying to forecast and predict the amount of electricity that their customers are going to use. So
Oh,
kind of a lot in the retail space, but across different industries.
okay, that's great. Maybe we'll just kickstart it with a question to you, right? So, what kind of customer data are modern retailers collecting today, and how are they effectively using it?
Yeah, so I guess if you think of the online store, that a lot of the touch points could be around purchase history, trying to understand the customer themselves, a lot of work around customer segmentation. So to be able to do that, you need to understand who your customer is, what distinguishes them against other customers, what groups of customers do you have, what behaviors do they have. So a lot of tracking around the purchase history, and their demographics, for example.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so this all just helps in getting that personalized view to be able to give offerings that are more targeted. And that's what we've seen over the years in terms of the trends. When you look at, for example, Amazon, um, recommended products is a big thing, which has been underpinned by AI.
Yeah.
Um, but then also looking at customer data from different channels. So it could be from online, as I mentioned,
Mm.
through the web, but also physically in the store. So a lot of programs exist around trying to track customer usage in the store. So that could be either from credit cards, and purchase history to track usage, but then also things like flybys here locally in Australia. There's loyalty programs, are ways that it can track the purchase history on the physical front.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, like the way that you track information online. I mean, like all you need to do is like drop a cookie in the browser, and then you can actually start to look at their browsing history. In a way, you can get demographic information, what are the interests, and so on and so. It's almost like a non-intrusive way to actually do it. But when you actually step into a bricks and mortar store, you're almost anonymous, right? People don't know who you
Much
are.
harder, yeah.
And you got to use like like you're talking about the flybys card and things like the loyalty cards until you tap your loyalty card, or when you approach your point of sale terminal. The people don't know who they are. I mean, I think video analytics is becoming increasingly part of that whole thing. On maybe they can actually figure out buying patterns, things like that. But but typically it's a very different experience between online shopping and also like a bricks and mortar kind of like a shopping, if you can call it that. But I think one of the key things is like people are choosing different ways of shopping. We talk about this omni-channel experience and things like that. And so it's just not online shopping. Particularly even online shopping, they talk about you can use mobile phones. People are providing very specific examples, applications, that kind of like make the shopping experience better. One of the things that I've been talking about, and I know you mentioned you're interested in things like large language models and things like that, right? How are those channels kind of like helping with the changing that whole shopping paradigm?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the power comes when so the large language models essentially are really good at understanding natural language. So you can ask a question and it can respond with a coherent answer back in the language that you've asked it in. Um, where it really comes to life is when you start connecting all of these data channels that we've been discussing with a model. You start to get a completely new experience.
Mm.
So one part of the large language models is just being able to understand language, but then another part is reasoning. We're starting to find that these models are having higher and higher levels of intelligence and capabilities to comprehend logic and reasoning. So when you start connecting the customer data, and then you have these powerful models that have these sort of very generalized capabilities, you can start to build out experiences that are really, really tailored to the customer. So we talked about product recommendation earlier. When you have this data, and if you had a customer that came to to a site, and they wanted to ask for a new product that they wanted to purchase, these models could have access to this particular user's existing purchases, and then they can sort of bring that context to the conversation as if you were talking to a customer support agent who would have all of this context implement from an internal database.
Yeah. It's amazing how some of this technology has progressed. I mean, in the last 2 years alone, since the introduction of ChatGPT, a lot of this has changed, right? Almost like a paradigm shift in the same.
Definitely, definitely.
Um, in a way, I think like you can have your own like a virtual shopping assistant, right? Making your online shopping feel less transactional and almost like having like a friendly conversation with them. One of the other questions that I wanted to talk to you about, right? Wanted to pick your brains on this was this concept of this AI agents.
Hmm.
And we hear that a lot these days. So how are how are these AI agents kind of like different to these chatbots, the traditional chatbots itself?
Sure, yeah. So as I said, large language models understanding good with language. So that's where the chatbot experience comes to life. You can ask questions; it'll give you a good answer. The concept of an AI agent takes these LLMs to the next step. And so what this is about making them more proactive. So they have all the context, they've got all this data, but the part that makes them agentic, which is what we're saying is we're giving these large language models a form of agency to make actions in the world. So that agency could come in the form of utilizing tools or coming up with a plan. So if you think of in the chatbot or in like a sales experience, they could have agency to be able to look up information in a database or purchase an order on behalf of a user, depending on the conversation. So they have agency to be able to do things in the world. That's where the AI agent concept comes from.
Okay. So in terms of an example, right? Like I'm just trying to get my head around how this would actually work in the retail space, right? Maybe maybe I'm thinking about little shopping for your next trip to Thailand or Bali or something like that, right? Is this some where would this be applicable where it actually goes and finds you like better rates or something like that? Is that how you see it, or is there like another example you can actually think of?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if we take that travel agent example, if you imagine if you go into a store, right, the first thing you do is you'll sit down at the desk and sit with a person, and then they might ask you, okay, where would you like to travel? What's your budget? How many people are you traveling with? They gather all this information up front, right? So the LLM through natural language can be able to ask these questions, gather that information.
Yeah.
But then if you think about that travel agent, what's the next step they're going to do? They're going to have to look up online, and potentially with partners that they already have existing relationships with, um, offerings and programs that exist. So we'll go look up Thailand, look up flights from wherever you are. So say I'm in Sydney, so look up flights from Sydney to Thailand. Look up accommodation. That'll be the next step. All of the different touch points within that experience of booking a flight. So these LLM agents would be designed to be able to gather that information, execute the search queries to be able to get that information back. And then the final step is, once you've got all that information, is to then actually book stuff. So that's where we start bringing in that agency to the models, is that the model will then surface the information back to you, say, hey, I found there's this deal to go to Thailand and book for 5 nights at this hotel. Would you like me to book it for you? And then the customer would be able to say yes, or they might want to change the plan a little bit. Then that agent would just book it for you.
Yeah. I suppose like you will, I imagine customers may not even know that they're speaking to an AI. Right? The experience will be so seamless. But at the same time, I suppose it's crucial for retailers to be transparent as well, right? That they, hey, look, you're talking to an AI or something, right? So I suppose in this kind of like automated world where we have AI and everything, so how can like retailers kind of like build that trust in with customers? Right? I think this is going to be a crucial part of this whole thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Trust is a really big thing. And definitely transparency is where it starts, to be able to, because the really, I suppose, for some, scary part of interacting with these large language models is how good they are at language. That there's this concept in the AI world over the years, and I think it was back in the 60s, 70s, around the Turing test, and this is where the concept of the Turing test was that if you could interact with a computer and you couldn't tell whether it was a human or not, then that computer has been able to get some level of intelligence. And we're pretty much there. I think we've definitely passed that Turing test. So
Yeah.
it's hard to tell whether you're talking to a computer or you're talking to a human. So the retailers definitely have the responsibility to be able to say that when you are interacting with an AI agent, that they need to be transparent. That's definitely where it starts. But then even within that experience, there's a lot of different steps that can be done to ensure safety and security in terms of the responses, because these models aren't 100% perfect. They do have their blemishes, but there are a lot of techniques that can be used to make sure that those models are behaving and within a certain constraints and bounds.
Yeah. I think one of the key things, I mean, we talk about AI in general, and I know large language models is just one part of it, and we need to earn the trust of that. But I think AI is used in a lot of other things. I mean, like, for example, if you're applying for a store credit card, right, is a very good example. And, you may come back and say, well, like your credit limit is like $3,000 or something like that, right? And your friend's credit limit could be like $6,000 or whatever it may be. But I think the AI should be able to explain why that is the case, right? Whether
Yeah.
it can be a very trivial thing, that inferencing and everything else would be really useful to earn that trust with the customer, right? And that's that. And once people start trusting the AI, that overall consumer experience becomes a lot better, I think, isn't it?
100%, 100%.
Yeah. In terms of like, I know we talk a lot about data and AI. Like, are there any risks that you can actually think about when you're dealing with a lot of the AI, particularly from a retail perspective?
Yeah, so I guess with this new wave of generative AI, there's a couple of risks in the online space. Because if you think of traditionally how retailers will promote their products, is through Google. So people will go and search something in Google, and Google has their banners where they can promote products straight away, and they have ad revenue programs to make sure that your links are in the top 3 sponsored links.
Yeah.
What we're finding now is that with these large language models that are connected to the internet, you don't really need to go to Google so much anymore. You can just go straight to these large language models. They will do the search on the internet for you and summarize all of that information that they can find, and then just give you a paragraph of information. So to be able, and so where this comes from, the traditional process of going to search is you might go to Google and they call it the 10 blue links. So you'll see all of the links and it's ranked by priority to your initial search query.
Yeah.
So that sort of experience of search is changing. So I guess the risk is, how do retailers make sure that when these LLMs are summarizing information that they find on the web, how do you make sure that your website is included in that summary? So that's a big question. And I think working with these frontier AI companies is going to be a big thing. OpenAI is playing in this space. They're trying to create their own search engine. Meta is also trying to create their search engine. So how they build ad revenue programs is going to be a big thing, and retailers need to get on that journey to understand how they can make sure that they don't lose exposure through that process. That's just one. There's heaps of different things that we can talk through there.
Now, look, we are real, I suppose, like we're living in interesting times as technology changes so rapidly, I guess, right? Which kind of like brings the question, like in this kind of like rapidly evolving, technology and online shopping, omni-channel experience and everything else, right? I was just wondering whether these real bricks and mortar stores still have a role to play in in this overall thing. I was just gonna kind of like move everything to online and that's it.
Well, definitely. I think the role. I think the physical stores are still there's still a place for them,
Yeah.
but the role in in which they play, I think the segregation between online and physical won't be as big of a segregation as it is now. I think it's very much that the digital world will be coming to the physical stores, so it's all about the experience and less about the transaction when you go to the physical stores. So one thing that we're seeing locally here is we talked about how data points can be tracked physically on the store, and flybys and loyalty programs was one of the examples. But we talked earlier about video, so seeing how someone moves through a store is something that is interesting. So if you think of how that digital world can come to the physical, it's like if you can see where someone's moving through, say, a grocery store, and they're walking down the soft drink aisle, and we know that traditionally this customer is always buying Coca-Cola, but they walk past Pepsi. Maybe that's an opportunity for Pepsi to throw a really targeted ad as they walk through that grocery store. So it's the blending of the two worlds. But definitely we're seeing there's a lot of retail stores that are really transforming what is traditionally thought of as the brick and mortar stores.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the things that we actually noticed, particularly COVID, post-COVID, is like this concept of click and collect kind of thing. So
Mm.
where people just do the shopping online and then they go almost like, the store becomes a hub where you go and collect,
Yeah.
whatever whatever you bought kind of thing. But well, as you know, as you're talking, one of the things that I actually was thinking about was the Tesla experience. I know it's buying a car, but pretty much, you when you buy a car through Tesla, I mean, you just the experience is online. You go pick your things, and you configure everything, and you pay a. Uh, Literally, what you do in the store is it's a showroom. You go look at the car, and maybe even take it for a test drive, or you go pick it up. Go there to pick it up. But pretty much everything else is like online. Everything, your overall experience. And I wonder whether things will actually change. You go pretty much to a store to try things out or whatever it is. But, most of the time you end up buying online. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how some of these things actually change over a period of time.
No, 100%. That's a great example because if you think about it, if you go to a Tesla store, the purpose of that store is purely like what is required for that physical experience. So it's a test drive, it's actually looking at seeing the car.
Yeah.
But everything else that's required to interact with Tesla as a retailer is managed from a digital perspective. So everything's online, and you can do it through the app or through the website. So I think we're going to see more and more of that as we progress through this new wave.
Cool. All right. Uh, a great conversation, Andrew. Look, I just want to quickly wrap up. And before I wrap up, I want to kind of quickly try and summarize some of the things that we actually discussed. I just want to give some notes and things like that. I think one of the first things around, I think the first thing is retailers are collecting vast amounts of customer data and using AI to optimize some of those experiences, drive insights and everything else. And the other thing was around, online and offline data. Sometimes you kind of like need to it's crucial for creating like a truly seamless experience. I think integration of some of that is essential. I think we touched upon some of the omni-channel experience. I think the experience is evolving, right? It's just not shopping on the web or shopping on in the store. It's all these other channels, and particularly we spoke about AI chats playing a crucial role in it, right? And I think one of the last things we touched upon is like while automation and AI assistants and things like that are transforming retail, I think that transparency and is kind of like important as well, just to build that overall trust and everything else. Anything else that you want to add to this, Andrew?
No, I think we had a really good conversation. So yeah, I think it was we covered a lot.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Whether you're a retailer or a customer, I hope today's conversation gave you a fresh perspective on how technology, particularly from the point of data and AI, is reshaping the retail landscape. And that's all we've got for you today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, man.